slides. My name is Ben Mcleish. It is the 3rd of October 2018, and we are doing a retrospective of the year so far when it comes to development of the service, the Altmetric service, in terms of its data, its features, and so forth, and then what some of the benefits are for our customers. I'm going to make sure that you can hopefully see my screen. So we will, yes, like I said, we will review the year, and then we will look at things like how to demonstrate global reach using the data from Altmetric, some of the ways in which technical transfer and policy impact can be judged using our service, especially with some of the new types of data that we have included this year, and also look at how we can essentially track citations to our work as an institution without expensive licenses to get that citation data as part of the Altmetric service as well. I did already say that we are recording this webinar. We will send it out afterwards, and I think we should be done in about sort of 40 minutes. So to review the year is actually quite a tricky thing to do, because even though there are only 24 of us in the entire company of Altmetric, sort of a sub-branch of digital science, nevertheless, there are 4 updates a month done essentially weekly from different teams. And so gathering that together and trying to make it something more than just a laborious list for us to go through is actually quite a challenge. So I've been selective with what we've picked, but I've picked the largest pieces of what the team has managed to engineer in the last 9 and a tiny part months, 9 and a bit months. It is my contention, I think it should be fairly obvious actually when you look at the landscape, that Altmetric is far and away the most updated, the most developed, the most developing metrics service of its kind out there. There are, I don't know, 4 or 5 comparable services, I suppose, that do or try and do something similar. We don't see the pace of innovation anywhere else that we are striving for, and we intend to keep it that way too. It's the right way of doing a business, the right way of working in the space is to be as innovative and as quickly moving as possible, I think. But you can be the judge yourself after I've run through what we've done. So let's begin with just sheerly where Altmetric is looking for research attention. So since January, we have tracked 128 news sources that we were not tracking before. We add those based on client requests, based on news sources being essentially published, being launched, and us tracking them, or where there is, for some other reason, been a reason for us to notice these sources interacting with research online. We've also added 2,500 blogs in that time, so we're now listening out for when those blogs ever link to different kinds of research. 18 further policy sources, that's quite standard for a yearly edition, but we are now adding policy more regularly than we have been before due to some team realignments. So that's good news for our customers. We're adding more and more of these sources like the World Health Organization and Brookings Institute over time. We are following 180 newer YouTube channels as well. These are sort of channels that regularly post informational videos that also link to research in their comment section, for example, in their description. And we are now tracking about 3,000 further short linking services, so link shortening services, I should say, meaning about 8,500 different services overall. That's every sort of service like t.co or bit.ly or feed proxy and so forth. There are an enormous amount of these. A lot of them are used for news sites to actually customize their own links so they can track their own link clicking on their website. That means, of course, that when they refer to links themselves, we have to be able to accommodate their short linking services so that we know to pick up a link that does actually resolve to a publication out there. So that's some highlights on where Altmetric is now looking. We are constantly building these out, and those numbers will all go up before the end of the year. What have we consequently found additionally since we've been building out and improving our ability to track content as it is talked about online? Well, we're now tracking explicitly 22.1 million research outputs. That could be anything from an article all the way through to a book chapter or to a data set or some other item online that has an identifier of some kind, like a DOI or a PubMed ID. That is almost, it's just shy of 88 million mentions of research since we began looking. And if you can see my very small screenshot there, you can see we do have a long tail that we really always say that in reality, you should say January 2012 onwards, that's when we're consistently, behind our data. That's when our data becomes standardized, really the last sort of 8 and a bit years. sorry, 6 and a bit years. But we do have this long tail that goes back and picks up sort of small news and patents and policy documents that are much older than that. They are there as well, of course. So it is quite a large database. Like I say, we mostly consider January 2012 to be the beginning, but we do see new data appearing in the much older part of our database as well as we ingest new kinds of sources, which I'll get onto in just a moment. That means that we also, due to our badges being placed onto publisher websites and for customers using our API, we have already served 10.1 billion API requests globally since we started counting them in January. That means that there are that many different queries for data around attention belonging to a certain piece of research. It's a vast improvement on last year as well. Some new actual sources of attention, entirely new categories have come along in the past few months. We added 9 million mentions of research that can be found in patent literature, which we did through the help of IFI Claims, a sister company of Digital Science. That means we have data mined within the patent to find the citation itself. On the left, the image there you can see is what US patent number 9925147B2 mentions on its 5th page. You can see this is a very dense text. It's very, very hard to read manually. It takes some skill to be data mining it as well. On the right, you see how that same item appears within the database in the Altmetric service, showing you each individual publication that has been mentioned and already color coding for you the other places where they have been mentioned. So you can see, for example, the first two have some green on them. That means they've also been referred to on YouTube, but they have also been cited within a patent. That patent may come from anywhere in the world. It could be that it's from Russia or China or America and cites research that belongs to one of our customers, let's say at the University of Sussex or Brunel or something like that. So we did that. That date range for that data does go back to 1975. This is a historical data set that we have mined and been able to put in. That means we were able to add back the older items as well. It's not the same as, for example, a news source where once we add it, we move forward with it. We don't hunt backwards in time for things. But with patents, very much like with policy, these are historical archives that we can data mine back as far as they go. And as long as there is some way of tying it to what is now an identifier for that old piece of research, then we can go back and show you the attention that happened previously historically. We have also made sure that for an item that does get patent references, we show all of the different patents that refer to this item. On the left, you're seeing a details page of an item that was published that has been referred to in quite a few patents, and we link out to every single one of those. You can always click to the full text in one of those examples we can show you later on. And you can see there on the right, I've filtered the timeline that we were just looking at for sort of all of Altmetric's attention that it's found to just the 9.1 million patent references that there are. So you can see 1976 there is one of the earlier, that's I think the very first year that we have mentions for literature, and then of course it is ballooning upwards as it goes along. Not a completely smooth curve, of course. There are waves of innovation, but you can see there's already data for 2018, which is not bad, given that a patent obviously has to be written, it has to be approved, which means that the researchers have also read the item. You're normally going to find that that does take some time. Some of those items may be from 2018 as well. It's most likely the case that 2018 patents are referring to research from a couple of years ago. So it's critical for our customers to be able to see where some of their older items are now getting referenced within inventions online. Some policy documents, like I say, we added 18 sources. There are some really, really interesting ones out there. The Penumbra Institute, the Council of Canadian Academies, the Metric Tide document, a little bit of an Ouroboros there. That's a study on altmetrics and metrics as being used in the UK. That has been sort of ingested as well, along with things like the Institute for Women's Policy Research and IW Cologne, which is the German Institute for Economics. So there are a lot of very interesting ones out there. We, I think, have found 300,000 references to policy that were not there in 2017, in 2018. So we found about 300,000 references within PDFs from these very prestigious institutions. The other major source is that we are now adding academic citations from the Digital Science Dimension service as well, so that these can be seen alongside the other attention data that are out there, so that we can, for example, appreciate in one go the news, blogs, policy impact, social media impact, and so forth, and then compare it in the same view to the citations that one has found in academia through the Dimensions service. That does not require a license to Dimensions. It is essentially free. It has been added for any customers of ours existing and going forwards, and it allows you to understand a little bit more when it comes to what is out there, how attention in total is tracking out there. Another major innovation, I think, and it's one that finally frees our customers from necessarily having to have licenses to a paid service that specializes in citations, and one where you do not, one where you have these data anyway, even if you have no particular ANI or abstract and citation database on hand or on campus. This hopefully will mean an immense amount of value for our customers. And not only that, we don't just provide just the counts of citations, we're even linking you to a page that will show you the vector of the citations over time. So is the academic interest in this piece still growing? Is it early? Is it actually waning? Is it going down? Is it quite an old item that has already had its citation heyday, so to speak? And then through a little bit of magic on the digital science team's side, we have also categorized the citing documents according to their field of research, which means in a few clicks you can get from seeing the social attention, seeing the broader sort of dissemination effects of a piece of research on the internet, to understanding a lot more about the citation behavior, the vector of those citations, and the fields of research which these citations are coming from. So in other words, you can see where in the scientific landscape or research-based landscape you are also affecting some change. Where is the attention coming from within academia as well as within the social web? This without having to do any sort of complicated work on it. So that so much for the sources we're tracking and the additional sources that we're tracking out there. We also shipped a new API that is available to our customers as well. They can simply go into their Explorer, as you can see here on the left. They can go and look at any part of their department or author structure. They can go and select an author. They could select a department, go and have a look and inspect those items on the Explorer for just that department. And then there is a neat little drop down that gives you an API output. Sorry, I couldn't find anything that looked a little bit more human readable. This is the API output for example, all the items published by a particular sub-organization or department within an institution. This means that you can get custom feeds for a particular author that belongs to your institution, a particular department or sub-department that belongs to your institution. You can have thousands and thousands of sub-departments, some of our customers do, and then you can get that as an API feed. So you can get all attention to a particular part of your research-based institution, or you could actually do it for any number of items that you felt like looking at. So it could be, for example, that you are interested in, I don't know, the Holocene era, and you find a series of items on a database that correspond to that. You've perhaps done a search on one of the databases. You have got a list of identifiers. You can query up to 25,000 of them within the Altmetric database and see what is being talked about for those items, and then also save those and get an API output for them as well. So you can create a machine-readable stream of data for any 25,000 items, be they from your institution or be they just out there in the world, authored by somebody else. So we created that so that you could do complicated, complex, advanced API queries without having to do a lot of coding. You can essentially navigate our service to whatever department or whatever slice of attention you are interested in, and then save that and then have the API output created automatically. So the API, one of the useful, integrated, included pieces of support that are in our system. Finally, we also built, or I suppose we actually rebuilt the highlights page, which means to say that we wanted to make sure that there'd be a bird's eye view of the attention to your institution rolled up to a level that makes sense for what we're looking at. So we made sure, for example, that it was easy to see demographic data of your entire institution, not just for one item. So what is the Twitter audience for this article, or what's the Facebook audience for another article or another piece of research. We have done that so that you can see it for the entire institution counted together, as well as things like items that have been mentioned most recently. So what are the latest news highlights, what has been going on in the last 12 hours with respect to any of the research that we've published. Who are our top engaging sources? You can see on the screenshot here on the right, it says most mentioned by. So this set of items here, there are only a couple of hundred of them in this example, but the World Health Organization, National Academies Press, and The Conversation are the ones that are most regularly linking to the research that comes from my company, my institution, whatever it is. So we have that. We break it down by where things have been published. So we'll show you where most of the attention's coming from. Is it coming from Nature, Science? Is it coming from Wiley journals, and so forth? And we've even created a score distribution histogram to see what percentage of scores fall into what buckets. Are there many low scoring items? Are there a lot of high ones? Is there a bell curve between these? We created this so that when people come to the Explorer, instead of being given simply a list of items from largest number to smallest number, they begin with almost a set of characteristics around the data that is there. That was, I think, launched in June. I think, yeah, March, April, June, something like that. We have also fully rewritten the API documentation. You can see that at altmetric.com/explorer/documentation/API. It has been rewritten because there are many other things that can be done now. We've allowed our customers to cycle their API keys, for example. There are different pages for pagination, different kinds of descriptions for endpoints, and so forth, to make it a lot more advanced. We had not done some updating in a while for it, so it made sense when we were rebuilding the API and adding new features that we had actually redo the entire documentation to make it much more comprehensive when it came to it. So there are some interesting uses already been done by customers when it comes to the API. My favorite is the London Institute for Mathematical Sciences. There's a screenshot here where we'll actually go and have a look at it properly online, because it is really quite nice. I will pop over to lims.ac.uk. Their institute's repository is over here, where we look at papers, and we can see rather nicely that they have a quite interactive way of showcasing their data. And if I, for example, search for debunking in a world of tribes, one of my favorite items from this source, we can see here when it was published. We can see the different PDFs and places where we can share it. They've obviously included the Altmetric badges. They've included the citation badges from Dimensions. But then they also have this sort of timeline of all the items that are being talked about on time. As they get mentioned, they sort of mark these as a timeline on the side. So you can see debunking was mentioned on the 8th of September. There are some other ones as well. How predictable is technological progress is another big hit by them. So you can see that. But they've also built in here under their funding data, they've built in an updating feed of where this item has been mentioned in the media to make it a lot more interactive. So we're seeing some interesting use of the API that's out there at the moment. I'll simply pop back here again. So it's gratifying to see that. More and more repositories are adding these data. I think that that is a useful thing. It is embellishing and adding some color to repositories out there, making them more compelling, making them show beyond just simple citation counts or simple download numbers, what the discussions and conversations are online. And we have also included in the Explorer itself a much more comprehensive way of searching through your own data as well. So as you can see here, this is simply called the quick search bar. If I just begin typing, for example, something as brief as RA, it is already looking for where the output itself will have that in the title, or where there are departments at your institution that match these searches. So obviously here it's picking out some very, very early the RA from strategic, for example, it'll as you type on, it changes the recommendations, the publishers that are out there, authors that you have told us about. In other words, these authors belong to your institution. They've been added into the data. We'll very, very quickly be able to show that as well. Customized per institution to make it a lot quicker to find exactly what you're interested in when it comes to finding out attention to particular pieces of research. We also actually, another rebuild, we rebuilt the ORCID query. So the ability to go into the Explorer, ask it for the ORCID of, in this case, Egon Willighagen from the University of Maastricht, and to have it return the 2,253 mentions that that researcher has received to the 85 outputs that are tracked, of which 82 actually have some attention. This was broken for a while because ORCID changed their API, which of course means we have to redeploy our team to rebuild that feature. That is working again now, so that you can essentially do a background research on yourself. It is another good reason to keep your ORCID up to date, so that you can essentially use the Altmetric Explorer to drop in a query, an ORCID that then gets passed over to the ORCID API. It brings back a list of identifiers, and the Altmetric Explorer then shows you the attention for those identifiers. So we have that relaunched as well. And so on quickly to how our institutions are using this now. So first off, because you can now order the results of your own institution's research by the number of citations that they've received, you can start to see very quickly, at essentially the drop of a hat, how the altmetric attention, how the online, I suppose, non-academic or counter-academic, the sort of alternative side of the alternative metrics that we're talking about, how those data compare to high citation numbers. Is it the case that things that are cited highly tend to get a good number of altmetric attention as well? Are there any outliers, for example, where there are a lot of citations, but there's actually very, very little research online, sorry, a dissemination online and sharing activity online? But it allows you to, again, order your data in that way. That was not possible before. Our users were unable to order by citations if they had, for example, the Web of Science plugin or the Scopus data. They were not able to sort of order it that way. It's just simply not how our integration worked. Whereas when we added the dimensions data, we indexed it so that you were able to say, well, show me the highest number first, rather than having to just see them when you click into an individual item to see the tab of it there. So that's certainly an improvement, to be able to navigate your data by high impact in terms of just citations. When it comes to things like demonstrating technical transfer, we are now able, for example, to pop in to our service and click on the timeline and then decide to only see the patents and see the patent references to the items over time. We can even narrow down and see that in January 2017, there were 11 mentions within patents to the research that we have identified as coming from our institution. This is, again, reportable. You can download it. I think I even have it over here. You can see we can get the type of mention it was. So this was within a patent. Here's when we found it. Here's the title of it. Here's the link. We actually linked to the Dimension service to take you to the patent, so you can go and read it openly for free. The research output title, it's actually citing, and again, it goes on here. There are quite a few other columns out there that I couldn't fit in that would just be mind-blowingly difficult to look at, but it'll show you the identifier, it'll show you the ISSN, it'll show you the attention score that was gathered for that particular publication, and so forth. Easily downloadable, easily reportable, easily producible via an API call as well. In exactly the same method, I can simply go to the Explorer. I can go and have a look in my institution. We're actually looking at exactly the same one that we were just having a look at the screenshot for. I can then decide to just go and have a look at these 446 patents. I could decide I just want to have an API output for that, or I could download it, or I could even go and click on the individual items. We've reworked this as well, so people can get very, very specific extremely quickly. We're now looking at a certain date range for just patent attention, and I can see very, very quickly, here's our item. It has done much better. It's been in the sense that it's been more widely distributed, I should say, not rather that it's not better, but that it has been more distributed, more shared, and that there is more activity surrounding it. And I can see by clicking on this item that I could either go to the item itself and go and read that item, or go and explore some of the other references that have been made, or I can even go and have a look at the publication, the first publication that is detected here, the one that belongs to us, and so I can there see how many other patents have referred to this. There are 58 patents that have made some use of this publication from 2010. In all cases, I can go and click on them. I can see where they were published, and I can see that this was also immensely popular when it came to citations. I can go and see the attention from the citations itself. If I wanted to learn a little bit more about how these almost 7,000 citations are behaving, I can get very, very quickly to how many of them were recent. So 2,000 of the 7,000 happened within the last 2 years. I can see the categories for them, where this is actually mostly affecting, where is the long tail, and what were some of the publications over time. It's probably a good guess to say that by the end of this year, we'll probably reach parity with these 1,100. We're already on 864. There's a good chance that this is still either on parity or even perhaps inching itself up. But we can get a good sense of the sort of the attention over time, as well as the other items as well. So we have mashed together as much extra data as possible without cluttering up the interface. We have made it quicker. We have tried to make it a nice and snappy and easy system to use so that you can stay on top of what it is that everybody is saying about the research, make it reportable, make it alertable, make it available via an API, and so forth. When it comes to things like the REF, the Research Excellence Framework in the UK, or what the Dutch refer to as valorization, I think that same word is also in use in Belgium. And when it comes to just generally demonstrating further dissemination efforts, the attempt to educate the public on research, the attempt to affect societal change, policy change, adding the additional documents as we have to the policy part of our tracking has yielded 1.3 million data points. From which you can there see the demographic attention for policy, where the policy in the world actually is, where it's based, that is making use of your data, what are your biggest hitting policy items, and this is happening in more and more different languages as we add more and more different sources from around the world. We are close to about 60 at the moment. We're adding more and more all the time. We should be way over 70 or 80 by the end of the year, and approaching, we'll cross the 100 number next year as well. This is critical timing because the Research Excellence Framework is in 2021 in the UK, so the more we're adding, the more we are building up that base and offering what is now easily the largest set of policy mentions that there are that can be tied to research. There is just no other source that has anywhere near 1.3 million mentions of research within policy and position documents out there. We've also launched the data resource that is the Research Data Access Program. So we are offering our data to your researchers for research purposes in a structured way. We can supply everything from Explorer access to JSON database to custom data retrieval or CSV, anything that they require if they are legitimately doing research on metrics and altmetrics. We offer ourselves for free as a data provider for that. I think that's quite important. It can be quite a challenge to get your hand on these data, especially as some of it has to be paid for. For example, with social media accounts, costs are either dictated by the kind of work you have to do on the data to get it cleaned up so you can actually do research on it. That costs time and money. Or you simply have to license it. There is no way of getting it without licensing it. So we are trying to support the scientific metrics community by not passing on those costs to individual researchers who are legitimately doing work and publishing in the altmetrics space. We felt that that was a feature of the system which should definitely exist, that is part of the service, is that we are a resource for research as well as just being a service or a licensable product, for example. So that about wraps it up just from the highlights. I went through dozens of presentations from our team and have kept notes on that. There's a lot I missed out. I deliberately didn't talk about things like database performance enhancements, how they made our database more snappy and quicker to respond, the little UI tweaks they did here or there, the work they've done with customers to make sure their data gets in, cleaning up publisher data that we've scraped online previously, finding better alternative sources for that, so we're better at detecting references. All of that stuff is extremely difficult to explain how that's done. it is quite boring to list all those little individual things. But that team, like I say, there's 24 of us, at least 4 or 5 of us are on the sales and engagement and advocacy side. We're not doing the technical work. So it gives you an idea of how effective this team has been. And we don't mention them enough, I think. It is easy to take a UI and just the features of a system as for granted, and then when you look back over a year and see how much has been developed, how much has been just switched on for all of our customers, they haven't had to pay any extra for it. This is all just part of the services to give more and more features, more data, and to ramp it up so quickly that the number one thing I have to do is to make sure my slides are up to date every time I speak to someone, which of course is a good problem to have. It's quite nice to be able to realize that I have to really vet every single number and feature to make sure that it's up to date with what our service is actually offering. But there is more to come. We don't intend to stop. This has not been some unusual rush. This is how we operate. We will be bringing in searching both by field of research, so those research fields you saw in the citations, working out where something is actually about, an article level categorization, working out based on its content which field it's in. We will be able to do that in the Explorer within a few weeks, and we're going to be searching by institutional affiliation as well. So we're sort of offering those features because they've been amongst the most requested that there have been. We deliver that also this year, also this month. The bi-weekly updates I mean that in the sense of being every 2 weeks rather than twice a week. I'm very confused by the fact that that word can mean both things. That is going to continue, of course. We're adding more sources, more policy, more features all the time. And we are continually feeding back with our customers, checking in with them for new requirements, new suggestions, feature requests, requirements for their reporting, efforts that are coming up where they're having to benchmark their institution, how that data needs to be made available. All of that is ongoing as valorization and as reviews and frameworks get developed around this. And we're adding, like I say, more policy documents than we've ever done before. It used to be that we had to take a few times a year to sit down and dedicate ourselves to this because it is so complicated to write those different algorithms that we would actually earmark a couple of weeks where we would rush these. That is now something that is happening month to month, all the time. That is going to be a constant sort of place and space in development. And we have, I hope I've convinced you, we've added more in 9 months than our competitors have in 4 years. When I look at some of the other offerings out there, it is naturally, of course, very hard to do this, especially if you're a small company. So it is, we're not gloating, we're just explaining how hard it is to do this and how important, however, it is to achieve a large, quick pace of innovation when it comes to this. We're going to keep this up. We're going to be in 1 year's time, hopefully another 4 years down the road in terms of development, and looking forward to some of the suggestions that our customers will have for us. So, and with that, let's see, how did I do? I did say 40 minutes. That was about 32, so I did all right in there. I hope so, at least. Thank you very much for bearing with me while I went through that. If you have any questions and you feel like answering them now, there should be a questions box here. There is also a chat box. It's quite tricky to look at that one, however. But if you do have a questions box, you can drop it in there. We still have a solid 20 minutes. If there is an uncomfortable silence, then that's okay. I will release you from the webinar early. And of course, I will suggest that if you do have questions, but you don't quite know how to formulate them yet, or they don't come to you until later, feel free to drop me a line at ben@altmetric.com. We're happy to answer your questions, especially if you're interested in some of the upcoming developments that we can sort of talk about in a couple of weeks. We will send you and be announcing on our Twitter feed and other places when those webinars will take place so that we will actually show you these features. I've seen them work in a staging environment already, so we're very nearly there. We're doing some last-minute testing. Or if you have any other questions about what other sources can be added, are there any limitations to the kinds of sources we can add? Do you have requests for particular new blogs or new news sites or other kinds of sources out there? If you want to be connected with our customers so that you can actually ask them the questions, feel free to. We have some that volunteer their time all the time because they understand what it's like. They've already done the implementation, they've explained it to their users, they've perhaps also already included different programs within the institution to sort of use these data. They are sometimes the best people to speak to when it comes to actually how to use these data. All right, and with that, I can see there are no questions. That's perfect. Hopefully that means I've been extremely clear. I will perhaps vamp for a few more minutes and just make sure that really nobody has anything that they need to talk about. I will just click out onto our timeline again so that we can see the updated numbers for today. Here's our full Altmetric database so that we can see what's out there. Like I say, yes, 1.36 million policy, 63 million tweets, 9.1 million patents and so forth. Decent amount of videos as well. Plenty of stuff out there. A lot of attention to research actually from lots of different places like that. It's good to see that our general trend, as you can see over time, has been that research is being talked about more and more online all the time, as you can see here, which is gratifying to see. It is actually good to see these numbers growing. The interactions that people are having with research are growing. People are posting items more and more. That's a good thing to see. I think if those numbers were dropping, I think we would hope to be reversing that, because the great conversation around research is an extremely important one. You can see here, like we've explained before, we can obviously track tweets in any language because we're watching out for when they link to items themselves. So you can see here, we have a good idea that it's from PNAS, but it is really the ability to track those individual direct mentions of research that help us aggregate this sort of data. Very good. Everybody is happy, I see. So I will end it there. Thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, like I say, ben@altmetric.com, feel free to follow us on Twitter. It's @altmetric as well. And we'll be happy to hear from you. And I wish you a good rest of the day as well. Thank you for joining.